One thing I remember that I want to put into my stories is that the Bible tells us to think God's thoughts after Him and to emulate Christ. Now, Christ didn't do His work that He came to do on earth all by Himself. He collected a group of people around Him, both to support Him, and He supported them. They were not only 12 disciples, there were also women that followed after Him and tended to things He needed to do. Well, in my life in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as I was becoming God's granny warrior for the peaceable kingdom, the word kingdom itself means a political structure based on the kingdom where Jesus was the ruler, and it required other people to be part of it. And part of my kingdom was a place called the Collingswood Methodist Church, and then Covenant Presbyterian Church, and then Koinonia Church, and then the one in Belmar, which was called Emmanuel Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and another part of it was First Presbyterian Church the Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, and it's where Dr. Everett Koop worshipped, and where Frank King, a physician, was, and where the pastor, when I was there, whose name skips my mind, had seminary students that were like Glenn McDowell and others that were part of it, and then part of it was Larry Falcon's group over in West Philly, and it was called Tobiah, and the thrift shop was called Tobiah, which means God is good. And Larry and his wife, Karen Whiteside Falcon, were part of my community, and also the Spade people with the McFarlands, and also then moving further out towards the suburbs of Montgomery County, were the Westminster congregations with New Life Presbyterian that met in the afternoon because they were reaching out to people that weren't really churchy minded. They were sort of candles and sandals people. And there was a great New Life group, and that started with a pastor that had come from Roy Stedman's group in the West Coast over to Philadelphia. I'll talk more about that later. But there were people that had joined this, especially with the International Students Incorporated and the McFarlands from every tribe and nation, that were interacting with each other to form the peaceable kingdom. And then there were the Quakers, the longtime Quakers that had started the city of brotherly love called Philadelphia with William Penn several centuries before. But remnants of them still existed in Philadelphia, and my husband had connections with the Haddonfield Friends and with the small group that met in Camden, and then with the wider group that met in 2 locations in Philadelphia. And they had a real sense of community that some of the other groups weren't even understanding, and an interest in the simple life that without a lot of additions of fanciness and formality. And I identified with this a lot. So in all of those areas, there were places for me to connect. And then being at Westminster, I did a whole interaction with some of the churches that were started by blacks in the areas of Philadelphia that I had never met before. And then there was Jim Careni's church that had a Hispanic and a white group, and also developed a Cambodian church all in one place called Nicetown, part of Philadelphia, that was halfway between Center City, Philly, and up at the Skilton House area, which was called Olney Logan. It took a lot of traveling to go to these different parts of the area, and my friends at Covenant Presbyterian Church didn't venture the way I did. They pretty much stayed, and they were called your normal suburban housewife. But I was not your normal suburban housewife. I made my travels across and back and forth across the Delaware River, which divided Philadelphia from what is called South Jersey. Now, South Jersey was supposed to be like the ideal place to live, and then you went to work in Philadelphia if you had money or influence or something special. Well, I found that I was a little bored being a registered nurse in South Jersey, partially because the attitude of the physicians over there was different than the attitudes of the physicians in Philadelphia. This was in the 60s and early 70s. For example, they weren't allowing men to be in the labor rooms with the wives or in the delivery rooms in South Jersey as they were in Philly. Also, Reach to Recovery, which were a group of many women that had mastectomies, wanted to come in to greet the ones that had just had one, to comfort them and show them how to feel womanly again, although they had felt like a body part of theirs was missing and they were feeling very ashamed. But the physicians in the South Jersey hospitals didn't want anyone to usurp their quote on their patient. The physicians in Philadelphia felt that there was a healthcare team working that included nurses, physical therapists, nutritionists, and all, that sat down and made plans for the patient as a joint enterprise rather than the physicians calling all the shots. And this was important to me. And it helped me to carry over into the realm of establishing the peaceable kingdom with working with many others. And one thing that was developed that I'll be writing and talking more about, because it makes it easier for my memory to recall it, is called the Skilton House Newsletter. This was started by a dear man named Reverend Dr. John Skilton, who had a PhD from University of Pennsylvania and also several degrees from Westminster, and he taught Greek and New Testament at the seminary for many years. And he had a great love for all people the same as I did, and had established a Tuesday evening dinner, and he had his mother living with him for years and years, but I never met her because she had gone on to be with the Lord about 3 years before I met Dr. Skilton at his home. I had listened to him speak in the chapel at seminary, and I didn't know that his mother and he had a Christmas list that went around the world. And eventually, the Skilton House newsletter that was done just on Numbers became a letter that I helped to write that went around the world with publicly announcing the activities that were being done by people that loved Jesus and had a desire to reach out to those of every tribe and nation. And also at the same time, there was going on politically a war in Vietnam that had sort of been cut off in '79, and then there were refugees that were called boat people from 5 different nations or groups: the Vietnamese, the Laotians, the Hmong, the Cambodians, and then the Chinese element from all of these that had a different culture than the languages that were. There were Vietnamese that spoke pure Vietnamese language, and then there were the Viet Chinese that spoke their Chinese dialects and read a whole different sort of writings, the Chinese writings, rather than the way the Vietnamese had been helped by the French to put their writings into the kind of lettering that we have in our own language, that French and English, that was much easier to read. So it was a challenge when I went into the GrannieWarrior phase to understand the different cultures, and I wanted to learn another language to communicate with them. And South Philadelphia High School opened up because they knew a whole lot of Vietnamese were coming into our city. They opened up for the people that worked with them Tuesday evening Vietnamese classes, and I went with them and started to learn it. But then lo and behold, I noticed that the ones we were working with, some of them spoke Hmong and Laotian and Chinese, and I kind of threw in the towel at this point and said, this is too much for me. But I'll tell you more about getting the Bible in these different languages in small portions to share with the people, so I could learn, especially in Vietnamese, how to read the books of the Bible and to point to a certain area when I ran into a relationship problem that needed explanation, and I would hand it to a Vietnamese person that they could understand more quickly, because I was not a translator, and I didn't really have sometimes the teenagers that were becoming quickly bilingual around me to help me. But this was a fun thing that happened, that I was able to learn just enough Vietnamese to find my way through their Tin Lan, Tinlain, was a paperback Vietnamese Bible that I carried around with me, and it came in very handy. It didn't have the whole Bible, but it had sections of Genesis, sections of the Psalms, and then sections of the New Testament. And it was a big help to me. Anyway, this is another little vignette of the story of how I came to be God's GrannieWarrior. I was warring against, as it says in the book of Ephesians, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with spiritual wickedness in high places. And we were to be prepared because the devil was searching around, seeing who he could devour. And as the people came into our country, and I was working with Dr. John